Well, hello there. Welcome back. Good afternoon, or wherever you are. Good morning, good evening. But welcome back to the shop. I haven't gone any farther from where we left. I've got the shelf in there with the leather on it. We did that last time. The drawer is perfectly functioning. Stops right where I want it. That looks very nice. So not going to be doing much woodworking today, but what we are going to do is design the lid. And I am borrowing plans from somebody that I'm borrowing plans from somebody that I follow, and on his version, the lid is one solid piece, much like the bottom was, a little bit thicker. I think I'm going to keep to that style. But what I have mentioned it a few times. And I wanted to show you what I'm talking about, that I want to make the top it's called a frame and panel construction, much like, and I've probably mentioned a couple times, much like an old-fashioned door, which, as you can see on my diagram up here, got 4 pieces. That makes the frame. And these vertical pieces, and it doesn't have to be that way, but that's the way that I want it. The vertical pieces are going to have a tenon that goes into a mortise inside of the longer pieces that will run along the top. I just think that's the arrangement that I want. And to give you a better illustration of what that is, I am going to bring this piece over. Hold on. Get the handles. Okay. This is another project that I had made that has the frame and panel construction. I'm just going to move it over just a bit so you can see it. We've got this is all one long piece along the top, coming down here. In here, this little dot is just a more decorative than anything. But there is a tenon, so this piece of wood doesn't stop here. It goes probably from here down to here, and is held in a mortise in this piece. And what that allows is for this panel right here to float, and it's a very tight fit, so it's not going to move, and it's decoratively made so that way the reveal goes all the way around, but there is no glue on this piece. This piece just kind of sits there, so that way when all of this wood expands and contracts with the weather, nothing cracks, nothing. This piece is free to float and expand and contract inside of grooves alongside here, which you can actually see. Get some air in here. This piece right here, because there's a groove in here that goes all the way through, comes out, I had to specifically cut this piece to fit in the groove and hide it. Otherwise, there would be a hole right there. There'd be a gap. And on the front, we actually did, the box is full, so that's why it's so heavy. We did something very similar. So the frame in this case are slats. Same idea. All these slats are fitted into grooves going around, and in this case, there's actually a layer of silicone on the inside that I let dry just to give it a little bit more compression, because I wanted all these pieces to push together, and I just like the effect of that. Same idea, and that is what I want to make for the top. For the top of this piece, and that's going to be the lid. Got to design it. I haven't come up with a plan. It's not on the plans itself, because by the time you finish hand planing something, by the time the dovetails come together, it may or may not have been exactly as thick or as thin as I had wanted. So better to save it to the end, and that way I can I can make the lid specific to this box and not another one I make later with the same dimensions, where instead of these being 1/2 inch, maybe they're, what would that be, like 9/16 of an inch, or the opposite way, where instead of being a little bit bigger than 1/2 inch is a little bit less than 1/2 inch. So I can't really factor that in until it's all done. Well, now it's up to the point we have to design it, and the only limitations that I really have are, I guess, my imagination of what I want, but also my material can only do so much. This is all the scrap that I have left over from breaking down the other pieces of the box, and many of these I am not sure what I am going to do with. They're thin. I could edge glue these. These may be coasters at some point, but not really going to do me a whole lot of good. But those are what's left over. However, I do have these pieces, and I've had this piece for a while. It's kind of chewed up here, and I've been trying to figure out how am I going to use this piece, and if I can maybe utilize from there. I can use that, and we'll look at that. That's more than enough length. And I think, okay, well, how wide do these pieces? How wide can I make them? And right now this is about 1 1/4. It's a little bit less than I was hoping for, but I'm thinking I can get. I'm sorry, that's 1 1/8. I think I can get 1 1/4 out of everything else. And there's nothing saying that the rails and the stiles have to be the same width. They can be different. The box I just showed you that's now off camera, they are all the same. They are they were just under 3 inches, and the fact that I'm so close without actually hitting 3 leads me to believe that maybe one of the pieces just wasn't thick enough to give me a full 3 inches, and I had to compromise, so I just went to the widest amount that I could. So I have yet to decide which pieces here will be there, but right now I am thinking that I want each piece to be just about 5/8 of an inch thick. The bottom, all of the sides are 1/2 inch. The bottom is 1/2 inch. I think the top being a more decorative element of the piece. I mean, this is I do really like that, and how all that grain just kind of flows together. But I like that contrasting maple, which will be the same for the top. I want the top to be a little bit more give it a little bit more oomph. So I think I'm going to go not 1/2 inch, but maybe 5/8. Just a little bit wider, and I think I can get that out of these pieces. Albeit they don't have to be the same. The rails and the stiles don't have to be the same. The width. They do need to be the same thickness for the lid. That is going to be very important, that they all end up being the same, so that way, it's all flat when it's lying down, and it's hinged. The bottom will hit the same time. The top will be in one plane. So that has to be done, and even if I'm a little bit off, I will plane it so that way it is even. And I guess another limitation is just how much overhang do I want on the bottom. I've got about 3/8 of an inch of overhang. I think on the top I want it to be about 1/2 inch, and I'm going to do that all the way around, even on the back, which will sound weird because when you hinge, you usually put the hinge right at the very back, and that adds up. But I want to have a little bit of an overhang, and this will get explained more as I do it. I actually haven't done this yet, so I'm excited to give it a shot. That way, when you put the hinges in, the hinges aren't going to be at the very end of the lid or the door, the cabinet, whatever it is. It's going to be more. It's going to be about 1/2 inch in, and that way, when you open it, that bottom 1/2 inch will hit the back and cause it to automatically stop and stay. And I don't have to worry about it falling over, because it'll only be able to go so far, and it'll be a little bit past vertical, because with the hinge and the barrel on the hinge, that takes up some space. So it's probably going to be something just like that, just barely past vertical enough where it won't impede anything going in the top, and it'll keep it in an open position without having to worry about it falling back and pulling the hinges out. Another limitation I have to worry about, the not necessarily the groove, the mortise and tenons that go in there. How thick do I want the mortise piece, the tenon piece that's going to slip in there? And right now, because I am limited, this seems to be my limiting piece. I do think I can get 5/8 out of here. And the big question as to how big the mortise is that's going to be in here, so that way when I join the other one into it and it slips in, how wide does that need to be? And I'm debating between 1/4 inch and 1/8 of an inch. And like I was saying before, everything else being hand planed, there is some wiggle room. It doesn't have to be an exact number. But here I'm going to be a lot more precise, and that's going to be based on the chisel that I'm using. The hole that will ultimately be the mortise where the tenon goes in is going to be a chisel thickness wide, and this is 1/4 of an inch. And if I put it on here, there's a good amount on either side, and I can probably get away with that. But this piece is about 5/8 of an inch thick, and you know what, that could work. I haven't committed one way or the other yet at 5/8, but I also have 1/8 of an inch, and this one is specifically a mortising chisel. This is what they call, let's see if I get this closer. This is a bevel edge chisel, and if you look, it comes to, well, there's a bevel here, but the edges are beveled, making this a little bit, this whole piece of steel here, making this chisel a little bit thinner, easier to get into tight spaces. This one, on the other hand, is a lot, I mean, it's it's 1/8 of an inch, so it's smaller, but this steel goes all the way down. There is no bevel on the side. Does two things. One is when I making a mortise, it tries to keep it in line because I can't twist it. It'll be locked in there, and I'll show you a trick that when I get to it, how I'm going to make sure everything is all lined up. And it's just a lot more steel on here. So like if I was to use a regular 1/8 inch chisel and try to whack it with a mallet through some hard mahogany, it's potentially going to damage. This is not going to get damaged, and so I have to figure it out, in which case I can set my gauges to that. But at 5/8, I can probably get away with using 1/4 of an inch. If it's 3/4 of an inch, then I would definitely use that, because the 1/4 inch would be in the middle, 1/4 inch on either side. Plenty of room, but I think that I will have that here. So let's take a few measurements. So the long pieces that are going to go, in this case, horizontally to the piece, those are the rails. And this piece here is, so it's 10 and, I'm going to call that 15 30-seconds, which is oddly specific. So I can make it, I have to add a 1/2 inch overhang for each end. So that's going to be 11 and 15 30-seconds, which is a really specific number. And for reasons I'll show you in a little while, after when I'm actually doing it, I'm going to make these pieces, these lengths. I'm just going to say, let's go a little. I'm going to go 11 3/4. I'm going to cut it to that length to start off with, and I'm just writing it down so that way I know what I'm thinking of. I believe each one of these. So if those were the rails, these are the stiles. I believe each one of each piece is going to end up being about 1.25 inches wide. So I have to factor that in. So when the piece goes on, let's do this. When the piece goes on here, it's going to be 1.25 inches wide. I'm going to try to center that, so the 1/2 inch overhang on the back, and so that way it's going to end up being right about here. And now if I have another piece there, well, now my stile only needs to be this thickness plus the length of each individual tenon. So it's not going to get measured from the outside of each. However, what I'm going to do, because I can always take some away, I'm going to measure this distance, which is 5 1/8. Let me do it from here. So I'm not perfectly square there. I'm not really far off. 5/32. So 5 and about 6/32. So 5 and 5/32. 5. And this is just going to allow me to rough cut these pieces to those lengths, and I'll decide the width of it, and I will get the shoulder to shoulder distance specific. Generally, with the tenon, I'm going to want it to come about halfway through the mortise, the rail piece. So if the rail is 1.5 inches thick, about 3/4 inch is going to be the thickness of the tenon. And this is a very strong. A mortise and tenon is a very strong joint. There's a lot of glue surface. I was looking it up just so that way I knew it for the story here. These were made about 4 years ago now. I think in 22 I made this box. One of my favorite pieces that I've made. These are perfectly smooth. I mean, it feels like glass. I can feel a little bit up here, which is, like my fingernail is gripping, which is telling me that this piece is kind of shrunk down a little bit since I've made it, because this was perfectly planed when I made it. So that way it was perfectly even. My guess is this piece here shrank a little bit, so it's no longer as wide as it once was. But the tenon is going to come to about here, about halfway through. So this piece, comes up over like this little decorative element. Looks like a drawbore pin, but it wasn't actually. This is purely decorative. I did not use that. Like, there's a way to use something like that to help pull this piece up and into the mortise so it's nice and tight, but the joints were fitting so well I didn't really need to do that. I just wanted that breaking up of the piece because I thought it looked nice. But this is a very, very strong joint. And I don't need that level of strength on the lid to the box I'm making over here, and I almost just fell off the chair. I don't need that amount of strength, so I can get away with a much smaller mortise and tenon, maybe even what we would call a stub mortise and tenon. But I am gonna go a little bit farther than that because, one, it's my favorite joint to cut, and two, that's just what I want to do. So that's how I'm going to do it. Once we do that, then we've got to route grooves into each of the pieces, and I will decide which piece is going to go where after I plan it down and I see what it looks like. I can't really make that determination yet. So we've got to plow the grooves, get it all fitted nicely so that way there's no gaps. We're not going to glue it up yet. What we're then going to do is prepare the panel. So this piece will be the panel that fits in there. And so this piece will be floating there, but this is it's very wonky. It's going to be a pain in the butt to plane. I'm going to make sure that I have very sharp tools before I start that. Take out the hump that's in the middle. Make this perfectly flat. Dimension the size, and the size will be a little bit thicker that it needs to be on the back, I'll kind of raise the panel, kind of like what I did with the bottom of the drawer, so that way it'll fit inside of the grooves. And then, like I said, there's going to be I talked about this in one of the last videos, right in the center, or maybe even a robe. I think I'm just going to do one little button right in the middle with a piece of ebony that's going to contrast with the maple, and it'll just remind me of my dad. But that's where we are now. That's the planning process for making the lid, and then once it's all made, we'll have to hinge it, and that'll be a bit of a thing. I've hinged a couple of other projects, but I've never. I think it's called Scotch hinges, where the hinge doesn't go all the way to the back of the door or piece. It goes more in the middle, and again, so that way when the lid opens, it doesn't flop down and go all the way. It has the like if the hinge was here, the elbows kind of stops it and prevents the lid from going any farther. And I've been wanting to try that on something, so I figured I'd do that here. Okay, well, thanks for watching and keeping up with me, and I'll keep you posted as when I figure out the full size and how we cut everything. Thanks for watching.